Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Change Your Channel. I'm your host, Carol Redden. And for those who are new to the channel, it is meant to help people live happier and healthier lives by helping you learn how to change your thoughts, feelings, and actions. I'm super excited to have a fantastic special guest with me today. It is Kimberly Kingsley. I happen to know her, and I'm very glad that she's here. She is a counselor and coach of personal energy and transformation. She has 20 years of experience as a communication and counseling faculty member at Scottsdale Community College. She is the host of the High Vibrational podcast, author of 4 books, all of which can be found on kimberlykingsley.com. And today she's going to help us talk about how to live a high vibration life. So Kimberly, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here and I'm doing really well. This is
Awesome.
this is fun to talk about high vibes.
I know. And as we talk about it, I was just thinking, I'm going to share with folks, we were just talking about how you have some grounding stuff in your space there,
Yeah.
which I was saying, I love that I know people who know about grounding.
Yeah. 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 I have what's called an earthing mat. And actually I just moved it. I have it under my hands because there's research that shows that we get a little out of balance being inside all the time. And so this is supposed to give us I believe, negative ions that we need to balance our energy field.
And how perfect is that, right? Because we're talking about how to increase or raise our vibration. So
Mhm.
I thought what we would do is first talk about, because we'll have a wide range of folks who are watching or listening. First, talk about what you mean by high vibration, and then also, I'm sure that will get us into flow. If you can talk about what it means to be in a state of flow.
Yes, yes. So you mentioned my podcast, which is High Vibrational Life, and I like to talk about high vibration as aligning with our natural selves, because sometimes people think we get all woo woo when we get into vibes,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and it's really not that at all. If you think about how you feel when you're in nature, how you feel when you're in the forest or at the beach or whatever, it's because everything around you is just so completely itself that
Mhm.
it's vibrating at a very high frequency, which feels really good to us. And we speak our primary language, and you're going to appreciate this as a communication professor. Our primary language is the language of energy.
Mhm. I believe it.
Yeah. And so, whether we call it nonverbal communication or, facial expressions, but we also experience people from a purely energetic perspective. And
Yeah.
so we can feel it very clearly when we're around someone who is either high vibrational.
Mhm.
So, in other words, aligned with their own nature to
Mhm.
the point that life energy just simply flows through them. There are no hidden agendas. There are no major blocks. You're not sensing their anxiety. You're not sensing their persona, who they wish to be, who they're presenting themselves as. You're just presenting them.
Yeah.
And so that's a high vibrational person. And a high vibrational life is when we continuously work toward just being so authentic and so clear and not carrying um, our baggage around with us,
Mhm.
that we can just be, happy and high vibrational.
Which is so great. Oh, sorry, I think it froze for a second. You know, I appreciate that you're saying this, because you and I have talked, and on the show, I've already talked about some episodes where I came across the vibration scale that can be found
Mhm.
online, right? At the very bottom are things like shame and guilt and fear. And it seems like, especially in the last year, lots of people are living in those lower vibrations, maybe without even
Mhm.
realizing. And of course, the opposite end of the spectrum, the higher vibrations are when you're in the space of like love and enlightenment and all of those kinds of things. And it can seem really daunting for somebody to go from, if we're operating down here for some reason, to being in that space, which we can talk about in a little bit. I do like to end with, ways that we can do these things. But I wanted to just point out that I like when you said it helped when we're living a high vibrational life, we align with our natural self, which is what's authentic for us. And I almost feel like I personally tend to forget what is authentic. And so I'd like if you can talk a little bit more, if it doesn't take us off topic, what might be going on in our everyday lives? What are some things that take us away from being our authentic selves? I know I listened to one of your recent podcasts on the high vibration life, and you were talking about a pattern that you're seeing, different thing impacts. And so I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that. What are some things that keep us from being our authentic self, living a high vibrational life?
Yes, yes. Thank you for that, because one of the things, because when people think of a high vibrational life, they think they just need to be happy and joyful all
Yeah.
the time. And that's actually couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
What we really need to be is authentic and true to ourselves all the time, because that's where the flow comes in.
Yeah.
So if you think of, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I appreciate in being our authentic selves, we then feel happier, right? I mean,
Exactly.
yeah. Go ahead.
Exactly. So one of the skills is emotional awareness and emotional agility. So not trying to be overly flowery and happy and peaceful and zenned out if you're not feeling that way, but really specifically identifying what it is that you're feeling so that quality of energy can move through the body, which is flow, right? And I should probably define flow a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Thanks.
then I'm curious to hear your perspective on the emotional processing, because you also help people with that. But flow, it's basically all of us, and this is all of nature. It's a law of physics called the constructal law. And so the constructal law states that every aspect of nature has a current that flows and the landscape through which it flows. So if you think about it, we are, and all of nature is as well, built on layers and layers of flow systems. So
Hmm.
we have blood flow, we have oxygen flow, we have digestive flow, and we also have emotional flow, creative flow, relational flow.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever any of these things are flowing, they're healthy.
Okay.
And when they're not, then we are headed toward dis-ease, right? We're
Yes.
experiencing dis-ease and headed toward disease.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think of it that way, it makes it a little bit more grounded, right? It's not just, oh, high vibes, good vibes only. No, that's not it at all. We're actually very literally, nature's blueprint set it up so that we're designed to flow. And
Mm-hmm.
so the aside from the physiological flow systems that we inhabit, um, we can think of ourselves as energy flow systems. And
Okay.
so we know that emotion is energy in motion. And so that's why it's very important to specifically identify it. First of all, to have body awareness. You
Mm.
know, that's what I talk to people about. That's the absolute first step, is just be aware of your body and how it's feeling,
Mm-hmm.
because then you can start to, sense, oh, I'm feeling a little uneasy here. And then you say, I wonder what that's related to. I think it's because I received that email, which was a little bit off-putting. It overwhelmed me, but I haven't taken the time to actually sift through it in my mind yet and process the feeling that goes with it.
Yeah.
So I just want to say one more thing, and then I'll stop talking for a minute. But what happens, and to tie that back into what's happening in today's world,
Yeah.
is that we end up getting a backlog of, some researchers now are calling it a stress backlog.
Mm.
And that can be a backlog of trauma. It can
Mm-hmm.
be a backlog of any unprocessed emotion. And so the body does its very best to store it for us and help us to function. But there's a real disconnect between the mind, the brain, and the body for many, many people.
Absolutely.
And so the nervous system can only process all this backlog when there's a connection there. So that just takes us back a little bit, the tip of the iceberg on what we're experiencing today.
Well, and I appreciate that. I want to definitely dive into what those patterns are that you're seeing today. But
Mhm.
I think it's great that you're going into detail with some of these things with regard to flow, because I've actually already talked about some of them on earlier episodes in that I have shared my very first episode talks about some of the what I call traumas and tragedies that I've experienced. And one of the things I've said, which as you just mentioned, and I think is true for a lot of people, whether it's an outright trauma or tragedy or just an off-putting email, if we don't think about how we're feeling
Yeah.
based on those experiences, they get stored, they hang out until we do the processing and talking about them, which is really what brings me to Change Your Channel and the work that I'm doing now, because I'm just figuring that out. I'm in my 40s now. I wish that I had realized, as you said, the connection between the brain and the body. And what you're talking about is exactly what I'm encouraging people to do, which is just start thinking, being aware of your thoughts, right? Are you having positive or negative thoughts? And then
Mhm.
how are those things making you feel? How are these experiences making you feel? And then once you're aware, what actions can you then take? And I, like you, I've stayed away from, my focus is not, it is to help people become happier and healthier, but it's not, I'm not suggesting everybody's going to be happy every day. And I'm not
Mhm.
suggesting it's easy to become healthy. I am still working on becoming healthy. There are
Mhm.
lots of things I can do.
Mhm.
So I also appreciate that you said energy, emotion is energy in motion.
Mhm.
That's helpful for me because I do have also a lot of physical ailments that I work through. And in my mind, given that I've not found a lot of support from traditional medicine that has really helped me, I've now come back to, okay, given that I've tried lots of doctors, lots of tests, lots of, things over the years, let's try working internally and let's try, trying to heal from within. So this is something that I think everybody can do. And what I noticed in your podcast, you were talking about some patterns of, because many of us are overwhelmed or overworked, overstimulated.
Yeah.
We're then unknowingly, I think, falling into these lower vibrations. So do you want to talk a little bit about those patterns and what you think is happening? What are some of the problems that we're experiencing?
Yes, yes. Thank you. So I'll start with a healthy energy system.
Okay.
So, a healthy energy system, we receive energy from all sorts of things: the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, our sleep, the activity, the exercise that we give our bodies. And we also exchange energy with other people. And the way that we're designed is for energy to move through our bodies, like completely through, like it would a tree. When energy and nutrients move through a tree, then it's able to blossom and bear fruit.
Mm-hmm.
If that process was interrupted early, let's just say that someone, some brilliant scientists, and I'm not, okay, I am being sarcastic, but I totally respect scientists. But let's just say that some brilliant scientist said, okay, I've developed a machine that if we hook it up to the trunk of the tree, we can siphon the energy and run the whole city. Okay,
Mm,
great, but then this whole generation of trees would die.
yeah.
So a healthy energy system requires that we have the ability to not only receive energy, but to contain it, to transform it into something greater than it was in like alchemy,
Okay.
and then to express our gifts that are very unique to us,
Mhm.
that kind of blossom out of that healthy energy flow. And what I'm noticing is a collective premature release of energy, so that because we're also overwhelmed and there's so much information, and I fall into this all of the time, so I'm not trying to at all say I'm above it. It's a collective pattern.
Mhm.
So what happens is we're kind of stressed inside or anxious. And what do? We pick up our phone.
Yeah.
We start scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And before you know it, it's been 30 minutes and you're like, oh, I was going to clean the kitchen. I was going to cook a healthy meal. Now I'll just go to McDonald's,
Mm-hmm.
And so this premature release of energy is sabotaging our organic growth, and it's sabotaging our ability to fulfill our unique purpose.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I could see that.
Yeah. And we both work with students.
Right.
And so this is what's kind of really lit a fire under me, is that it's heartbreaking when you look at them and you see in their eyes this glazed over, like, yeah, I have dreams, but I don't know how I'm going to get there.
Oh, I know. Well, and I think it's true of the younger generation, folks who are traditional college students. When you talk about overstimulation, I mean, most of this folks at that age have not experienced very much of their life, if any, without a cell phone.
Yes.
And so those folks also probably went through high school with a great deal of social media, whereas you and I did not have that, right? So I definitely see that with students, but I also, like you, I fall into this trap as well. And just in the last year, when I've really started thinking about, because when this pandemic started, my energy definitely dropped. I was giving my energy, because I know you talk a lot about giving energy to other things. I was giving some energy to the news, let's
Yes.
say, and the return on that investment was negative. I felt worse as a result of watching the news. So I stopped watching the news, which
Right.
I know will sound crazy to some people, but I was able to, of course, talk to other people for the highlights. But I found that to be very helpful. So do you think that that's true of even non-college students, like just the everyday person? Are there stressors or, I guess, patterns we're falling into that keep us from saving our energy?
Yeah, absolutely. And right. And so ultimately, our energy is to be expressed. But if it doesn't rise up and get through the heart center, if we
Yeah.
lose it before it gets to the heart, then it's not filling us up before we express it.
Yeah.
So I guess to your point, yes, we're all doing it. And it's not only technology that's distracting us. Some of us are carrying such a big stress backlog that anything will do.
Yeah.
It can be a beer, it can be TED Talks all day, it can be binging on Netflix, it can be anything. And so I think it's really important that we all identify our specific compensation strategies.
Yeah.
And they're compensation strategies because we're unconsciously trying to compensate for something that we are missing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're maybe missing, in my case, maybe it's a sense of peace or, a sense of maybe happiness, and so, yeah, we're trying to fill, and this is sort of at the crux of everything I talk about as well, as, or at least on my first episode, I was looking externally for healing, for the most part of the last, 30 some years, and did not find it. I found some things that helped a little bit, some things that did not. But it isn't until I start really managing, and I know you have some suggestions, what I can do to heal, which is think about sleep, think about, and I say think about because I've never been great at sleeping. But listen, if I've always been this highly anxious person, and maybe probably tied to some of the traumas I experienced at a very young age, no wonder I'm not sleeping, then I'm probably hanging on to these things of, one, hanging on to, like, let's say, fear and anxiety, and two, maybe I'm missing a feeling of safety. Then
Exactly.
if I don't manage those or remedy those, then I'm looking outward for, right? Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying? To, like, then fill that in. And when I go, I noticed that I've gone through a habit of, not only will I binge Netflix, but then I'm also doing puzzles or email on my phone. So now I have to have two sources of something else. And I started thinking recently, like, this even makes me more tired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is not helping my overall healing process. If I'm
Right.
going to use, let's say, Netflix to unwind, then that's ideally what I would use it for, instead of then stimulating myself more with the phone.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's a perfect example. And we all know when we hit that fine line of, okay, for this last 5 minutes, it's felt really fun and entertaining to look at my feed. But now all of a sudden my energy shifted and I'm starting to lose energy. So
Mhm.
there's this, we don't want to get rid of the fun things in life at all, but we really want to be aware of when our energy starts to shift and when we're starting to use it to fill us up.
I have a question, and I agree. It's how are we using technology as opposed to letting technology use us?
Yes.
And I'm also wondering, because you mentioned something called a perfect storm in your podcast, and it sounds like in general we're kind of being reactive beings,
Mm-hmm.
again, sort of looking for fulfillment, looking for happiness. I guess, for me, it's a little bit hard to try to get out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess, in my mind, that's where it starts with paying attention, right? Just
Yeah.
trying to be mindful of, how do I feel? What am I thinking? So I'm wondering if how we can, what are some things we can do, I should say, to either reclaim our energy so that we're not, if we think about energy like a commodity, which I do,
Mm-hmm.
where are we spending it? Who are we giving it to? I guess first I would say, do you think technology is one of the bigger sources of draining our energy, or are there other things, do you think, outside of technology?
I think that anyone could draw a diagram that has energy in the middle and that has all the things around it where they lose energy. It
Okay.
could be a toxic relationship with a boss. It could be a habit of eating or drinking something that takes more energy for the body to digest than it gives.
Mm,
It could be a negative thinking, like you talk about, getting in these circular obsessive thinking patterns that drain our energy. It could
mhm.
be the backlog of trauma and stress that hasn't been processed yet. So I've already named really quickly like 5 or 6, and then those kind of just are there, and then we technology just sits on top of it like, okay, let's get some relief, and we get these little dopamine hits.
Mhm.
Okay,
Sure.
so instead of having this waterfall of fulfilling, like life impacting energy that moves through us completely, let's just get a few drops of dopamine and be like, maybe that'll do it. It never does it. And so it leaves people so unfulfilled and seeking. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, in a state of lack.
in a state of lack. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I try to help people understand there's a stress cycle and there is a flow cycle.
Okay.
And so if the stress cycle is um avoidance, okay, it would be the first, and then avoidance and distraction, and then fragmentation. So the energy within you gets like shot off in these different areas. Some of it gets suppressed as emotions, some of it gets drained as physical, whatever. So the second one is fragmentation. The third is compensation. So we compensate for that because we don't have the energy that we need. And
Mhm.
then the fourth is actually projection. So
Ooh,
then we project our essence of who we are. We project who we are onto the world and then chase it.
interesting.
Yeah, so that's the stress cycle, and that's what I see. That's what my new book is on. That's what I see. The people going round and round in that, and it's a progressive state.
Yeah.
It's worse over time instead of better, unfortunately.
Kim, I think you just described why I'm so tired all the time.
Okay. Well, good.
It's very possible in a nutshell. Okay, that's it. We don't have to do anything anymore. I figured it out. I'm probably, yeah, I mean, because out of the 6 or so things you talked about for sources of energy loss, I think I can relate to all of them.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're probably all connected with each other. I mean, if you're have unprocessed trauma and you look for comfort in food, it's those two things are, or whatever you're
Oh,
going to look
yeah.
for. So that's probably me. So that's helpful, very helpful to think about. So then you mentioned the opposite of that, which is the flow cycle.
Mhm.
So yeah, what does that look like so that I can change my channel and start doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So the flow cycle is the opposite 4 steps, but it aligns us with our fundamental nature. The
Okay.
first one you already mentioned, and the first one you call it paying attention, but I call it presence in my model. So that involves paying attention, having awareness, having body awareness,
Mm,
when we are made of energy and information, and so this energy carries information, and the only way that we know how to move forward in a way that is life enhancing instead of life depleting is by becoming aware of the information contained in the energy.
sure. Okay.
So I recommend that people not only try to be present throughout the daily life, but practice presence proactively through
Mhm.
meditation or some kind of mindfulness training, because it actually changes the brain, like you change a muscle at the gym.
Mhm.
And it gives us the capacity to respond to life's challenges with more resilience and agility.
Okay.
Um, and so, yeah, so presence is the first step. The second step is integrity. And I don't mean like be a good person. I mean, um, 2 things. One is integrity means integration. So
Mm,
integrate, process your feelings. Be one whole person instead of a fragmented person. We're so much more powerful when we're whole and we're flowing. So I like people to think of integrity as um, so if you're practicing presence and you become aware of a certain energy and you say, okay, what is the information in this energy that's asking me to do? Integrity is actually following that. So it is doing the right thing, but it's doing the right thing according to you.
yeah. Ooh. Oh, I like that.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that. I was watching a show the other day, and I used to watch a reality show for folks in the UK, and they were talking a lot about, oh, I think I let myself down, meaning they, were they lied or something, did something dishonest. But I think you hit on something really important, which is I often think of integrity as not letting other people down or not doing the right thing for other people or for the greater good. But very rarely do I think about doing the right thing for myself in terms of because I deserve it, or you know what I mean, the same way other people deserve it.
Hmm.
So that's really, I think, helpful to think about. So step 2, integrity, process
Yeah,
things as a whole, in terms of what's right for us.
right. Yeah. And you mentioned deserve it. Yes, we all deserve it. And we all have issues with feeling worthy. But B, like the world really needs it. If we
Yes.
don't integrate our own energy, then we don't have the fuel to blossom. And if we don't blossom, then we don't fulfill our purpose, which is, in my definition of purpose, it's where our gifts intersect with the needs of our surroundings.
Mm,
So the world really needs us to be the best version of ourselves. So saying no to a friend that wants you to go to a party that sounds draining is saying yes to the world.
yeah. Oh, that's a great way to think about that.
Mhm.
And that's another, I think we kind of go through, it's easy to go through life doing things we've always done based out of obligation. And I know
Right.
that can happen with friends. It's certainly family members, putting ourselves in environments that we know drain our energy as
Mhm.
opposed to fuel us or keep us our authentic selves, right? Because when we're in those toxic environments, as you mentioned, we really can't be our authentic self, because our authentic self
Mm.
wouldn't put ourselves in a toxic environment.
Right.
Right. So yeah, I think that's important to think about, that integrity step.
Yeah. And we wilt when we're in toxic environments. We don't blossom. We hide because we
Yeah.
don't feel safe. Right. So the first is presence, the second is integrity, and the third is transformation. And this is a really interesting point, because when we practice integrity with perseverance, we organically transform.
Ooh, okay.
But it's hard, because think about, like, if you have a relationship, you mentioned parents, so I'm going to use this as an example. If you have a relationship, someone has a relationship with their mother, say, for example, and the mother is, draining. Let's say she's dramatic. So she's always complaining. She's telling you about the fights she gets in with other people. You're listening on the phone for an hour, looking at your project that you wanted to work on. And this happens year after year, decade after decade. And finally, you say, okay, I want to take my power back. I have a purpose here. I want to blossom. I'm going to take my energy back. And so then you start practicing presence, noticing how you feel with her, noticing that it's after 10 minutes, it starts to become a drain.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, I'm going to practice integrity, and I'm going to do right by myself. I'm going to do right by me. And so you say, Mom, I got to get off the phone because there's really something I want to work on. And then she's like, really? I've just talked to you for we've only talked for 10 minutes. I never see you anymore. And then she goes off on this rant. We have two choices.
Mm-hmm.
We can either give in to the pressure, or we can persevere with our integrity, and that relationship will transform.
You make a great point, because I have noticed that as well. We can either, if it's physically, we can just not put ourselves in those physical environments. But also, it's possible, and I've read and heard, if we do raise our vibration, the people who are not willing to raise to the same vibration will generally fall away on their own, because
Yes.
either they will want to raise with you and they will enjoy being in that higher space, and they'll go, you know what, when I'm around Kimberly, I just feel better. So I'm not going to gossip. I'm not going to really, spread a lot of negativity, because that doesn't work in her space.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm going to stop talking to you because you won't engage in my negativity. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great point. It's kind of a win-win. And I don't think most of us realize we can do that. Again, we just fall into this reactive space, and then we don't go through that transformation step, which is in my model to take the action. I like yours a little bit better because it's a little more vivid, right? But yeah, I mean, it's a hard choice to make, especially if it's a parent. But if we think about it, it sounds like what you're saying is we're doing ourselves and the planet and everybody a favor by staying in our state of flow and
Right.
our,
Staying in integrity.
yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And it applies to everything. And I love what you just said about, vibration. I view it as vibrational soup. We all just kind of, we go with our tribe, right? Naturally. We flow together, like vibrations. So that is so true. And it's such a beautiful principle that we don't have to work too hard at it. We just work hard on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
The whole persevering with integrity in order to create transformation, it just takes some pressure off, because the same thing happens, say we wake up one day and say, I want to transform my body. In my case, every day.
Me too.
Right? I
Yeah.
want to transform my body. So I'm going to be present, and I'm going to, stay in touch with how I feel. And then I'm going to stop eating right when I feel satisfied. And for me, that's one specific integrity point in my life, is that. And so if I stop eating right then, what's going to happen after a month of that? I'm going to have some physical transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it really applies to everything.
As a side note, for anybody listening or watching, you might find this interesting. For many years, I tried different diets. I tried Atkins. I tried just every. I don't want to name company names, but I've tried lots of programs, lots of diets, lots of fads, and as per usual, they don't work. They didn't work, I should say, for me. I don't want to say Atkins doesn't work blanketly, because it does work for some people. But all of the time I was focused on losing weight, I never had success. I became vegan. I think you know this, a couple years ago, not to lose weight, but for health reasons. Because again, I started looking internally at what I could do. And because of my physical ailments, wasn't really able to work out. Certainly don't sleep very well. So that makes working out challenging. I lost 15 pounds without thinking about dieting because I
Mhm.
was focused on taking care of myself, not the diet. And
Mhm.
then even since then, you kind of hit a plateau. I noticed that when I stopped thinking about something external, which is I need to look better for this outside source or outside reason, and just like you said, be mindful of stop eating when I'm satisfied. And maybe if my body wants to move, move it. If my body wants some sunshine, have it. If my body wants some sleep, do that. When I turn my focus inward, just on taking care of myself,
Yeah.
I'm healthier.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about, I think, with the tree. The tree does not have to work at being a tree.
No,
The tree just exists
no.
and it works.
Yeah. No, that is so beautiful. You just perfectly described the integrity piece.
Oh, good.
You pay attention to, if we could all just change a channel, okay? If we could
Yeah.
all change our channel from trying to fit in to trying to feel high vibration, trying to feel like really good in our own skin, trying
Yeah.
to feel our energy, good physical energy, flowing emotional energy, clear mind, great relationships with a lot of emotional flow. If
Mhm.
we all just changed our channel to thinking about that and
Mhm.
then honored our integrity when we got, because we're all very intuitive beings, we all can speak the language of energy. We get better at it with time when we practice. But if we were all to tune in and say, okay, so I know now that I feel better physically if I'm vegan. In your case, it's
Mhm.
not going to work for everybody, but that is a great example of practicing what I call organic integrity. How do I preserve my energy and my container or vessel so that it can rise up through my body and through my heart so that I can start a podcast?
Yeah, exactly. It sounds simple and it sounds overwhelming at the same time. I think I'm only able to do this work after being in some very dark places. I talk about having, had to go to rehab twice. Um, just waking up, opening my eyes, putting a smile on my face for work was a struggle. It was incredibly difficult. So I definitely, like we started earlier, in the beginning, we're not suggesting that happiness fixes everything and we're not suggesting it's an easy thing. I think what we're both suggesting is if we focus on taking care of ourselves
Mhm.
and being mindful of what moves us, what inspires us. You mentioned purpose, and I'll talk in future episodes more about, purpose-driven lives. Um, by taking care of ourselves, we then are better um, beings for
Mhm.
this place that we're in, right?
Mhm.
And then happiness comes because we have taken care of ourselves. So it's definitely, I think, a journey for a lot of people. And I don't know if do you have another number after transformation? Because I also want to see if
Yes.
we can talk about some specific things people can do.
Sure. Okay, so we'll wrap up the flow cycle.
Oh, that's
So,
okay. Yeah.
yeah, so the fourth stage in the flow cycle is demonstrating mastery. So we practice presence, we integrate whatever comes up, and we transform by persevering with our integrity. And then that organically lifts us to the next level. So then we're up leveled. And regardless of whatever stage a person is in their lives, if they start at the beginning with presence, they will continue to spiral up into
Mhm.
their highest self. So it's really important that we demonstrate mastery at our current level. And that means if you're trying to transform a relationship with mom, if you just say, Mom, I wish I knew how to say this with better words, but I don't. So I just need to say that for now, I need to get off the phone because otherwise my mood is going to go down. Okay,
Mhm.
so it's not like textbook articulate or descriptive or a textbook boundary, but that is that person's mastery in that moment. And
Yeah.
then what happens is then they get off at the phone and then they get feedbacks, which is part of demonstrating mastery. We get our feedback, and that's where we get a chance to practice the whole growth mindset thing. We can integrate that feedback, start with presence, and go through the cycle all over again.
That's awesome. And I think you're describing kind of where I am now. And I'm only giving examples for me so that maybe other people can relate. I definitely don't want, it's not really about me necessarily, but I am operating from the place of what I've learned. Um, I have to remind myself all the time, I'm not yet where I want to be with all of it. But I will say again, as you're talking about in terms of demonstrating mastery, even when I have really down days for whatever reason, or something impacts me negatively or takes me by surprise, or I lose my patient, I notice that I'm still better than I was 2 years ago. My down days there aren't as many days, or that down period isn't as long as it used to be, because I have gotten better at all of these skills that we're talking about. And it's okay to not be perfect, because you're saying develop mastery in the moment. Like wherever I am now is good.
Yeah,
And well, if I can celebrate that and acknowledge it, I can then keep getting better.
totally. Wherever you are now is perfect. It's
Hmm.
perfect. And that is the exact place to keep evolving.
If I can stop there too, I love that you said it's perfect, because I know there are people listening. I've had some people reach out since I've started recording, and they're struggling with things like drugs and alcohol, and have said, those are really hard things to get away from, if you will. And oftentimes I hear there's a sense of, I'm never going to get to that perfection, right? So why bother if I start drinking again or doing drugs here? I mean, I'm going to be in a state of recovery the rest of my life, so this doesn't really matter, right?
Mhm.
But if we can think of ourselves as where we are right now is perfect,
Mhm.
maybe that takes the pressure off of getting to that place of perfection. We are already perfect. Where we are right now is in fact perfect. We can
Absolutely.
we can make progress from here.
Right. Absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's we are multi-level beings, and at our core, we're completely whole. And so
Mm,
we can tune into that perfect wholeness at any time. Every human on the planet is flawed. Every human on the planet has patterns that derail them. And so, regardless, with people who are, struggling to get off of alcohol or drugs, it's super complex. So, those people, I feel like should even have more compassion for themselves, because
right.
and they're all complex, but I feel like people who you know get addicted to something, they have even more passion and drive than people who don't sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that intense, if you think of the stress cycle versus the flow cycle, people who are, and I thought of you in this, not in terms of addiction, but in terms of your drive. You're very, very driven. And to me, that means that you have really good, authentic, strong energy. And when we have really good, authentic, strong energy, if it's not flowing, if there's some kind of leaks or blocks or something, then we feel the pain even more acutely.
Mm, yes, I could see that. And I appreciate the compliment. Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day, and I know lots of people are in the same boat. This particular project is something I'm working on, and I really can't explain why, other than I feel called to do it. Um, it's right now it's a passion project. It's something I'm doing in addition to working full-time and part-time. And I'm just wanting to help spread the message. And, I think it goes back to your saying, we're already perfect and whole beings as we are.
Mhm.
Um, I'm just able to, I still go through a lot and I still have difficult times, but I'm trying to change my channel. day by day, sometimes moment by moment. And it's accepting, I think, the journey and where I am that allows me to maybe put energy into something new. And I, as somebody who's worked for a lot of years in career services, helping people transition, that's what I would love for everybody, is to stop doing the things that we think we're supposed to do, for career choices. And you do this too. You work with people in a career perspective as well, probably even more than I do now, which is tapping into, that's the beauty of doing this kind of work, is then it can translate into a more fulfilling career, a happier home life, better relationships. Became able to live our passion. So I appreciate that. And I think that you've given us so much to think about. I know that we've taken more time than I asked you for. So I'm trying to be mindful of that. Because I think we could talk for hours, and
We could, yeah.
I don't know if people want to listen for hours, because I know they've got things to do, right? We're
Right,
part of their
of course.
consumption now.
Mm-hmm.
But I know in your podcast, you talk about things like how to reclaim our energy, include we can limit our exposure to the things. And we talked about that. We can turn the TV off and spend time with our kids, or, get off of Facebook and spend time with our spouse or ourselves, right? And do some yoga or do some meditation, or just sit quietly if those things seem difficult. We can, and as you say, more, invest more in ourselves in general. You talk about organizing, spending time cooking, taking walks, things like that. And if you have the time, I would check out Kimberly's most recent podcast. Again, what is the name of the most recent podcast?
It's your energy is your life.
Yes.
And that's under the High Vibrational Life podcast on Spotify, iTunes, all the
channels.
All the channels.
I know, it's kind of funny for my YouTube. I think it's hard to find my channel name because it's how to change your channel, or changing your channel. And then when you put that in YouTube, it's all of these things about other topics, not mine, of course. So I'm working through that.
Oh,
what I'd like to end with, if you don't mind, is, because there's so much that we can say. And I think hopefully we've already said, if there was somebody listening or watching who said, yeah, but how do I get started? You've talked about so much. If you could pick one thing, so I call it the one thing that people could maybe start doing to raise their vibration. And I know it might be hard, but what would be the one thing that we could start doing that might have the biggest impact?
Practice self-forgiveness.
Ooh.
So the missing link here is the heart. Flow requires that energy move through our heart. And if we're judging ourselves, then we're keeping our hearts closed. And so I just would like to encourage people to be easy on yourself. Give yourself grace the way that you would give a baby grace or a pet grace, or because it's all a journey for all of us. And when we start to practice compassion and forgiveness with ourselves first, then what that does is unlock the energy flow a little, and you might have a few tears.
Okay.
And then you might have some authentic anger about something you went through. All of it's good, but it's amazing what happens if you just put your hand on your heart.
Okay.
And just say, I forgive myself, because every day I try my best.
Ooh, I'm going to do that really quickly. And maybe if you guys are watching or listening, do it with us. You said, I forgive myself because I am doing my best.
Because every day I try my best. Every day I do my best.
Every day I do my best. You're right. When I stop and think about what I'm saying, that is touching.
Yeah, you can feel the energy move through you in the form of emotion.
Yeah, it's energy in motion.
Energy in motion. So I recommend that people start there, because we need to love ourselves so that we can love others.
Oh, that's so great. Kim, thank you so much for being with me today. How can I know that people can reach you on kimberlykingsley.com. Do you want to talk just for a second about how you work with people and organizations so that they know, how they might be able to engage with you more?
Yes. So I work with individuals as a coach, and sometimes a counselor if a person is local. But most often I work as a coach. And if they're not in a mental health crisis, just untangling from toxic relationships or dealing with whatever they can with practical tools that lead to increased flow. I also started a business in 2020 called the Flow Lab, which
Yes.
does organizational training on resilience and personal energy management, and just helping people to navigate these uncertain times with greater clarity and energy. So those are kind of, in my podcast, those are my passion projects.
Which is great because then it shows you're in touch and being your authentic self. And then again, as we do that, we add value for other people. So, whether we're individuals or companies, which I think could benefit certainly from having stronger, healthier teams of people who appreciate their own value,
Hmm.
and then operate from that space. There's a lot of research I won't go into that talks about how much more productive people are when they
Hmm.
are in that space. So it's a win for everybody. Again, thank you for your time. Thanks to everybody who's listening or watching. If you'd like to learn more or follow us, we are on YouTube, of course, and also Facebook, Change Your Channel. My website is www.changeyourchannel.life. And I hope to have more information posted there soon. I'm working on things as quickly as I can as we get started here, including a newsletter that's weekly-ish. But with that, I'll say thank you, everybody, for watching and listening, and have a great day.